like one of them.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Good. How are you
Good.
doing? How's everyone? Okay. Having a good
Yes,
day?
all good.
Saturday
Yes,
conference?
yes, yes. And I think we have been loaded from morning around like 9 hours. We started 9 o'clock IST
Yeah,
and
yeah.
almost
Well,
6.
good
So
job. Hopefully you'll get time to watch some cricket later on. India, West Indies.
yes, it's a fourth match, right? So it's still live.
Yeah, yeah. Should be good. Should be exciting.
Yeah.
Do you want me to share my screen?
Yes, please.
All right, let's get that done. So, hand off. That was my Viva Explorers promotion. Right, okay. So,
Specific to Europe, right? Viva Explorer, or you have members from US as well?
say again. Sorry, I missed that question.
So Viva Explorer, can you also talk a little bit on the Viva Explorer as well so that people know?
Yeah, I'll quickly I'll mention that if nobody has mentioned already. Yeah, absolutely. It's a great movement of volunteers, mainly MVPs, some Microsoft folks as well in the community as well. So it's basically generally, all things Microsoft Viva, sharing experiences, pointing out links and everything else. And yeah, it's been going on around for I think almost a couple of years now. I think it was started by Leslie, which some of you may have seen her presentation earlier today. Leslie and Sarah. Sarah's not here today. Sarah Fina. So yeah, both of them basically kind of initially started off as ideally, realist and the idealist, if you like. So yeah, since then we've just kind of built up really from there on, and just more and more people have come on board. So I think even Stella, Marite, I think they're both on the call in the meeting here in presentations. So I think, yeah, they're also Viva Explorers. So yeah, it's all happy days. We good to go, right, Lalit?
Yes, we can get started now. I
All
put
right,
the
cool.
call. Okay.
Sure. Okay, great. Well, look, I think first of all, I think thanks very much for everyone at the Microsoft Viva Days. Appreciate your time on Saturday, and at least taking out time to tune in, and especially for this particular time. I think is around what 6 o'clock or thereabouts in India. So my session is about designing and implementing Microsoft Viva services, really kind of just to help anyone out there, mainly in the IT, really, if you like, who are already heavily resourced into looking after all the systems and everything else. And then the last thing you want is this thing called Microsoft Viva, right? So, how do I go about deploying it? And especially, there are so many apps that comes with Microsoft Viva. So as a result, I put together this presentation, really kind of give you the next 40 odd minutes or thereabouts as a kind of a quick rundown of the things to look for, to watch out for. And I must say, I think, especially after what 2.5 years since Microsoft Viva was introduced, what started out as 4 apps, you've now got about 9 apps. So it's only growing and getting bigger and expanding within the apps. So hopefully this session will kind of help you out, depending on where you are in your journey at the organization. So feel free to ask questions. I don't mind getting interrupted, or maybe just post your questions in the chat window, and I'll try and answer it towards the end or as I'm going along. So I keep looking to the left over here because that's where my Teams chat screen is. So keeping an eye on that as well. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, I'm Chirag Patel. I live and work in London, work with Patel Consulting, been around 20 odd years, started off as SQL Server, DBA, and then obviously SharePoint came around 2002. And since then, I've just been basically playing as end user, administrator, and also my first online migrations into what was called Business Productivity Online Suite, BPOS. I did my first migration back in 2012. And so since then, like, many of the speakers we've seen today, we're all on a wonderful journey of Microsoft 365, kind of really just, carrying out all the work. So I generally work as an independent consultant as well as some of the Microsoft partners in the UK, to really just kind of help them out, as well as deliver and do migrations as well. So I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer. I write my own courses, mainly in SharePoint, Teams, and Viva. And so, techchurag.com is probably the best way to get to me. And techchurag is the handle for the Twitter and LinkedIn and so on. I'm also an organizer for M365 UK. Started off as an online community back in the days of the pandemic that we had. And so, you're welcome to come, share your experiences, or, grab a speaking slot. And if there's any support you need, I'll be happy to help you out. Okay, so as far as, kind of briefly just introduce what Viva Explorers. So I'm one of the kind of, the characters that Viva Enabler, kind of believe in just switching things on, obviously with the right design, with the right requirements in place. But until you don't try it out, you will not experience Microsoft Viva, because every organization is unique in what they do and their data. So your experiences for Viva will be unique to you, obviously, and the story varies organization to organization. Um, so very quick one, it's been around for quite a while, and we use a lot of apps and services, a lot of tools. We find our ways to try and do our work, get the work done. Albeit if it's a project or some kind of teamwork, doesn't matter, whatever it is. And the last thing is, why do we need some other tools? And especially not just Microsoft tools, but if you're using some third-party tools to manage your work, so your projects or kind of appraisals or feedbacks or whatever it is, then why do you need to worry about Microsoft Viva? And I think a lot of the deep dive sessions you've seen today goes in a lot of details, but when you look at holistically, we're all looking at what we call the employee experience platform. And what that essentially means is that in your flow of work, whatever you're using, mainly Microsoft Teams these days, what we use is to be able to kind of tap into your existing data that you're already using in order to kind of make the most out of that through integration experiences, right? So, Microsoft puts it in those categories of communications, knowledge, learning, resources, and insights. And within that, you have all the vast amount of apps and services at your disposal in order to take advantage to basically improve you and your managers and the organizations in every way possible to bring everyone together, right? And essentially, that's where Microsoft Viva suite of apps really comes in. So mentioned earlier, there's about 9 apps, and essentially, if you like, these are the if you like the new category. Even though it's been 2.5 years, some organizations haven't even really got onto it yet. But if you look at it from a category point of view, you got what we call communications communities, workplace analytics, goal setting and management, learn knowledge, role-based experiences. Now, you may use some of those tools in your organization existing already, or in some cases you might not. But essentially, how kind of this comes together, all those 9 apps, Viva Connections, Engage, Insights, and so on, they come in basically in that particular category. So what you can't do is you can't just decide that you're going to roll out a particular category. So when it comes to looking at your design side of things in terms of what you're going to implement, you need to really kind of think about what is it that you've already actually rolled out. So we look at the actual individual cases for that for each of those apps. But when you look at it, from a end user's perspective, they have no idea what these Viva names are. And even some of the IT folks that I kind of visit, they don't even know what Viva is. I've seen some MVPs, for example. Some of them have heard of Viva, but doesn't know exactly what they do because it's quite complex. It's kind of takes a while to understand in terms of what it is and how it all fits together, right? So if you look at in more detail each of those apps, then what you'll find, and I won't go through each of those things, but if you look at from start to Viva connections all the way to Viva cells, everything in between, then you're kind of really looking at all the things around, from say Viva Engage, building communities. So that's your old Yammer that you have, except that it's now expanding into what we call Viva Engage, and then you got the answers, leadership corner, and all the other features that's all coming about. Looking at from a feedback point of view, as well as insights, employee engagement. I think Kat's session earlier around the Viva Pulse, the feedback mechanisms, whatever it is, right? All these things come together in form of those particular apps. You got Glint and Pulse. And then you got your Viva Goals, Viva Learning, Viva Topics. So some of these systems rely on having things like SharePoint. If you're already using it, then you can take advantage of those platforms. In addition to that, you got your Exchange online email systems and everything else. So really kind of this, I mean, this is the slide I always use when I have to introduce what exactly Viva is and which bits, does the organization really want to roll out, and then really expand on that particular Viva app to understand more what it takes to implement. So I've put the links on the slides, and I will share these slides, of course, so that you can actually take a look at those in more detail. Now, technically, when you look at Viva apps itself, under the bonnet, if you like, you're looking at, the primary services such as SharePoint, Yammer, Stream, and everything is surfacing into your Microsoft Teams, as well as other apps and services as well, like, SharePoint, Outlook, and everything else. But if you look at Viva Connections, those are your four main areas of services, and a lot of you probably are using Viva Connections because it's free, or at least it's part of your E3 license or E5, depending on which one you use. Then obviously you've got your other apps at the core of it, topics, insights, and learning, which some of it is free and some of it is obviously license based. So you can see SharePoint's everywhere, of course, in that one. But then you've got in Viva Topics, the AI as well as Microsoft Search, and being able to surface all that content you have inside your SharePoint system in order to bring all that into your Teams or wherever you're surfacing all that information. Viva Insights looks at the former My Analytics, Workplace Analytics, email systems, depending on who you're sending to, all those things. And again, it's honoring all your existing security and compliance and privacy, all those things. So you're not really kind of adding any particular layers of that into your Microsoft Viva services. It's using existing ways of how you manage and govern your environments. And then Viva Learning, last one, is all about, not just surfacing things from SharePoint, but also bringing your third-party content sources in there as well to be able to bring all those together. And then ultimately, it's all about just giving those extra tools to your organization employees in order for them to do their job more effectively and be able to get kind of, if like, uplifted by the managers and so on to be able to do things better. Now, when you look at it from a setup point of view, how you kind of set it up, and again, been kind of around for 2.5 years to see this, what started out, and there was some few PowerShell scripts to be able to use and activate and turn things on. Viva Admin Center didn't really even exist until a few months ago. So now, at least for some of you, if you haven't really rolled it out, it makes it a lot more easier to go into your Microsoft 365 Admin Center and really kind of start going through that setup guide process. So some of you may go into your individual admin centers, but very simply, if I just go into my demo environment there, it just kind of shows you there. So if you go into your admin center, whilst you go all your other admin settings on the left, then typically setup will have all your, not just Microsoft Viva, but other services from your M365 tenant, to get to that. So having purchased and procured some of the licenses, if you like, you will see those things appear in your admin center here. Now, this is just a selection of the apps there you have, but the consistency is there regardless of which app you use. So to make it easier, if I was to go into, say, Viva Engage, very consistent way of kind of getting to the setup, the tasks in order to go through when you want to switch things on. So it kind of gives you all that particular set of tasks, what to do. So this is a simplified view of what you can do with Viva Engage, essentially assigning Engage administrator role, similar to what you had with Yammer. Pin the Engage app in the Teams, manage additional settings inside Viva Engage. And some of those things are listed as priority or optional. So when you look at our previous slide of all the apps and services you have, then essentially you can then decide which way to kind of go by coming into here, or you could go into the SharePoint or Teams directly into those admin centers and go through in that sort of ways. But I won't go through that today. Okay. Now, with Viva, obviously there are several admin roles you get. So typically you got your existing admin roles anyways, which you will need in order to kind of power up your Viva apps. So SharePoint admin, knowledge admin for Viva Learning, Viva Topics, you got knowledge manager there, and sites admin. So we'll look at some of these apps in a bit more detail, some of the specifics in there, but it's something to think about your roles, permissions when you're kind of deploying, which you would normally do anyways for any systems, but this will give you that kind of overview as to what kind of things you need to think about. So Viva goals, especially there, you got organization admins and organization owners. If you had seen Kevin's session earlier on today, he probably talked about a lot about Viva goals and some of the permissions things. Then that's where you probably have to think about who can do what in each of those apps there as well. Looking in Viva connections, and I'll kind of just go through this because I've got about 45 slides. I don't mean to overload you with all the slides, so you can have that for your content reading afterwards. But if you look at the Viva connection side of things, there's only a few things you can do inside, not only just bringing SharePoint intranet, if you like, inside Microsoft Teams, but being able to then go into various areas of getting to it. So the navigation of it is kind of a key things you need in order for that to be able to work. Also being able to look at the links to share, the content in Teams chat or wherever it is, and then search kind of from one Teams search bar to be able to search across, not just in Teams, but also in SharePoint, all inside the Teams interface. So being able to connect and bring everyone together through the Viva connections. Basic steps there, you can, obviously you need to have a dedicated home site for it in order to have that landing page experience inside Microsoft Teams. And up until recently, you could only do one home site per tenant. And now you can do about 10 home sites. So what that means is that for every Viva home site that you have, you can have at least you can have 10 of those things. And that could be because if you're a large organization, you may have different regions in the world, then potentially you can set up multiple Viva connection experiences for those regions itself. So for each of those, you will need a home site for that. But essentially, these are the steps you would need to go through. And the key part there you get is the dashboard. So the dashboard page is essentially a SharePoint page in which you can then add your widgets. And if you'd seen Nandip's and Smita's session earlier this morning, then you will see that they talked about Viva connections and how you can customize and adding those extensions to it. So that dashboard experiences can be then available in multiple Viva connection experiences too. Things to care about, look about this is, where does this content come from? So yes, if you're using Yammer, great. If you're not using Yammer, then obviously, or Viva Engage these days is called, then that content will not really appear in your Viva experience. So, the things to care about there is the resources you get, your audience targeting features, how you can tailor each of those experiences to be able to bring inside your Viva connection pages. The connections dashboard itself, there, when you look at the actual individual pages, you're not looking at just the web parts, which is mainly on the left-hand side of that page, but you're looking at the dashboard widgets itself. So they're similar, kind of a bit like web part, but they're more specific, tailored for the dashboard itself. So that's something you would need to think about when you do roll out Viva connections, which might be available to every employee in your organization as to which particular widgets you would want to make it available. And of course, you can then use audience targeting in order to kind of restrict to certain viewing audience there for the web the widgets in the dashboard. Yes, you can extend them. So these are just some of the guidelines in terms of what you can do in order to kind of build the web parts, customizing your SharePoint pages in order to add various JavaScripts on the pages and so on, as well as the adaptive card extensions, which has been around quite a long time and not just unique to SharePoint, but also within Teams and other experiences as well. So you can bring all that together to customize your Viva connections from that point. Okay, Viva topics. So this is more about knowledge expertise. If you're using SharePoint immensely, and especially when you get the hybrid workforce, people come and go, switching jobs, and they want to kind of get on board very quickly, then this really is very helpful because to kind of, if you're working on projects or any particular contracts or whatever that content you're working with within the organization, then you can actually bring all that together through the use of what we call the Viva topics in order to curate. So this happens behind the scenes through the use of the machine learning AI in order to then surface the relevant information that might be of interest from a knowledge management perspective. So when you look at that in particular details, again, topic could be anything. Here you got some examples, whether it's a project, event, location, product, whatever it is, then essentially those things are picked up, or you can create your own manual topics and essentially build that topic, not library, but more like a knowledge center of all the topics and related topics to it as well, to be able to bring all those things together. So again, from an implementation point of view, you would probably need some kind of understanding who can actually a resource who will look at from the knowledge management perspective, not from a central point of view, but for everyone to be able to work on it and being able to then power up your Viva topics to be able to work with that. So topics get discovered every time, so when there's new content being added, so you will need somebody to be able to manage to say yes, that should be a topic, make it available for everybody to consume, or maybe not publish it. So you have those kind of controls to think about. They appear in various places, what we call the topic cards. When you hover on people, and if they've got any topics relating, they'll appear there, or in the pages itself, or in the topic center in SharePoint. And some of these things that I'm talking about here, you probably already have seen in today's sessions in there. And so there's an example of a typical topic, what it looks like. Again, this is the license based. So, to be able to view or publish the topics, you need a license, Viva license for that. So I'll come to the license a bit later on. But essentially, this is what that card would look like. And essentially, it brings everything together, not just content from one SharePoint site, but from multiple SharePoint sites, albeit whether that's files, sites, folders, or whatever it is within that. Few roles you should be thinking about is, the kind of roles and responsibilities. So you got your viewer, contributor, knowledge manager, admin. So all those things will come into play if you do decide to implement Viva topics as to who's going to be able to do or what. So hopefully that guideline can actually help you out when you do select Viva topics for your organization. Fairly simple process, kind of subscribing to Viva topics, assign your licenses, connect that people to knowledge. So we can go into our admin center, the setup guide, and look through that, and then being able to at least go through and select. If you want to select all the SharePoint sites, great, everything will be there. But if you're concerned that some of the SharePoint sites will be very sensitive, confidential, or highly secure, highly confidential, then you may want to deselect some of those SharePoint sites so that they don't go around and having all the topics cropping up. But only people who's got access to your SharePoint will be able to see. So not everyone's going to see everything. So we're still honoring the existing permissions that you have on your SharePoint environment. And of course, you can exclude any topics if you don't want them to appear as well. Key thing to remember is in terms of the language, few points you got here, but the one that's of more interest is the language side of things. So yes, all AI works in English, Spanish, French, and German, but if you're using already with SharePoint, then that's obviously available in many languages in order to kind of see all those things, the language pages itself. So I mentioned about the security privacy, so that's still preserved. Again, we'll talk about this a bit more in more detail, but when you look at the security privacy, don't just look at it from the overall M365. Look at each individual apps in order to understand exactly where that location of the data is and where it resides. So again, most of that data is in your data center, wherever that resides. But there are some services that, obviously that does reside elsewhere when it comes to like some machine learning experiences. So again, that's something you want to have a look and think about. Yeah, licensing, very quick one. So whilst you can see everything in there, so as a Microsoft 365 license holder, you can see all those things, but you do need an add-on for a lot of the things you want to see within your Viva topics itself. So Viva Suite, that's your flagship license. That gives you access to all the other apps, as well as additional features that may not be available if you're already having add-ons in your licensing itself. Okay, so Viva Insights, kind of moving fairly rapidly on this one. So again, Viva Insights, I think this one, in my view, I think this is going through a lot of changes, right? From where it's come from. First it was workplace analytics, and then it kind of got morphed into Viva Insights. You've now got the additional apps, the Viva Pulse and Viva Glint. Insights to me is becoming a bit of a generic word here, but this is all about that employee productivity and well-being, right? So the free one we get is personal insights, the emails that we get, the insights emails, or you can just view your own briefing emails, analytics, emails that you're supposed to respond to, all those things, good stuff, great. But then the additional licenses that you need is for the manager, leader, and analyst tools there, right? So those are the powerful ones. So if your organization really cares about you and the employees, because they want to make sure that you thrive in your organization and make a success of everyone, then really, I mean, manager leader insights really help that out, because that can really help them to understand if you're kind of overworking, or if you're kind of doing too many meetings, or how many meetings you're attending that are kind of very regular or irregular. All kinds of dashboards and reports are built in order to kind of do that, to make it available. few screenshots there in terms of what that looks like in various places of personal insights, manager insights, again, all within Microsoft Teams, the Insights app that you can use in order to surface all those analytics and the trends around what's going on from a work pattern perspective. But when it comes to setting that up, how you roll that out, it's quite a bit of an effort there in order to really understand how you go about doing that. But essentially, you've got, if you look at the green regions there, because the personal insights is kind of there, you can still turn things off if you don't want the emails to go out or what have you. But you're looking at those kind of roles, the Exchange admin, Viva Insights admin, and all the other roles, to really kind of roll those things out and being able to access for manager insights, the manager settings, and then being able to understand, the number of people, having creating those teams of management, minimum 5, as I understand it, you need, and then being able to then define how you monitor those manager insights. All that is confidential, nobody sees that. So essentially, it's to help out your employees in order to kind of get those aggregated insights into your teams. Okay. So again, like I said, you got all the information there to be able to do that. The only thing I mentioned, yeah, you need license for manager, leader, insights, and so on. Viva Learning, I must say personally, I've not spent much time with Microsoft Viva Learning. That's not to say, it's not most overused, because a lot of the Viva apps are getting a lot of attention compared to, say, Viva Learning. But again, it's still in one place of your Teams environment to be able to access all that information. So you can connect to your existing SharePoint document libraries or wherever you might store some ad hoc learning sources, or if you're already using some third party. And there are listed learning providers in which you can then connect and bring all their content into your Viva Learning. One thing to bear in mind is that if you do use, like with every learning management system, they have their own sources, recording all the activities, the matrix, and all those things. That kind of information does not come in Viva Learning. It stays wherever it is, except being able to access your learning catalog or courses that you might be doing. So that kind of information is there, and it's not stored inside Viva Learning. Okay, so that's something to think about from that point of view. But if you do go ahead and set this up, fairly straightforward from that perspective, but essentially knowledge admin role, which is there as an optional itself to be able to use to configure the settings for your learning, the content sources you may want to do. So again, you can go through that point to be able to set that up. From a license point of view, a couple of differences you get there is things like if you want to get the recommendations, being able to recommend somebody else for learning courses that you might come across in Viva Learning, then that's obviously subject to license with the Viva Suite sort of things you might need, or as an add-on to be able to use that. So that's integration with partner content providers and learning integration as well. So you get your existing LinkedIn, whatever's free, already in your Viva Learning. So again, if you want to get more kind of into all those things, again, you got Viva Learning, Viva Insights, block time for learning, all those kind of wonderful things. Then you have to really think hard as to how much you're going to invest in Microsoft Viva Learning to be able to take advantage of such features. Viva goals won't go in that great detail because I know Kevin did a great job and a great session he had. But essentially, if you're using Excel spreadsheets or you're using some kind of appraisal systems or whatever the mechanisms you use, this really kind of puts all that away and in a way makes everybody accountable and really making people part of it, right? For the goals that you're trying to drive in your organization. So it uses obviously objectives, key results, in order to then be able to track at every level to be able to kind of drive your work from that. So yes, there's integration as well with other systems. So Azure DevOps, Power BI, and being able to bring all those reports in there. So from an implementation point of view, is something that you might want to think about as to which existing systems you could use, bring them into Viva Goals, and then be able to then drive that forward. So, like with all these systems, there is a good adoption methodology they use that Microsoft have kind of laid it out in general sense how you would go about, driving that through. So you would use the same methodology. So if you go to adoption.microsoft.com, then you will see various adoption guides as to how you would kind of really make sure drive the adoption for all these tools. So Viva goals aligning, focusing, integrating those tools, and being able to then kind of get to it. I'm just conscious of time-wise as well. So what I did wanted to show you just before I kind of go on to that is if I come to here now, I know Pulse has just kind of gone GA, but if you look at it from a Teams point of view, right, and it's a question I always get because sometimes you will see that, whilst Microsoft want you to use Teams for everything, so you got all your apps and everything else that's laid out on the left-hand side, but some of these apps, you can actually access them through different ways as well. So like Viva Goals, for example, you're not just strictly limited to just using in Microsoft Teams. You can go and use it outside of Teams into another separate browser application altogether, right? So depending on how much time you spend in here, you can then be able to manage instead of going back and forth in Microsoft Teams. So same ways as for Viva connections and so on, being able to access your SharePoint sites completely separately outside of Teams. So those sort of things, they don't need any efforts around implementation side of things, but just to be aware of on that you might do that. Same thing for Viva Insights. Again, if you look at from a daily workflow point of view, whilst you probably don't use Teams constantly because you're probably using other systems or to do your work. But when it comes to that overall flow of work that you do inside your Microsoft Teams, I think, in my opinion, it's quite overwhelming from a Viva point of view. So don't just go and roll things out, but at least try and have understanding as to which groups of people might want to use some of those Viva apps, because I wouldn't say Viva apps is for everyone, and at that point you probably have a bigger effort on your hands. So you probably want to go through turn by turn, just going back to my first couple of slides that I had in terms of how you're going to categorize to try and drive some of those tools in there. Okay. If I go back here, so kind of come to the resources. So there's tons of resources there, what I've showed you today. So if I was basically just a tip of the iceberg, really, in terms of how you can go about setting it up. Thing to bear in mind is one of probably the most important link there is to join the if you like, the Viva customers. So there is a customer connection program that's run by Microsoft. You can go to that link, you can submit your form, and can actually join. If they accept you, of course. But they go through that process, and that way you can learn more about how other organizations are using Viva, and sometimes you also get the NDA Microsoft views from that as well, in order to to try and how to shape that product. So if you're really interested in trying to learn more from the others, how you can benefit from that, then I would urge you to join that customer connection program. Viva blog, of course, subscribe to that every day, because every other day something's new, something's been updated or improved, or new releases. So that's probably the best way to keep up to date on that. And at the last count, when I looked at the Viva roadmap, I think there's 14 things rolling out, 73 in development. So there's more things coming our way. I won't go through that now, but you know where the Microsoft 365 roadmap is, so you can just look through that and plan your implementations around that as to what's coming through there. So there's one there, topics in Outlook desktop. That experience will kind of roll out, if not rolled out already, some of the features in there as well. So have a look through that roadmap and kind of just build that in your design and implementation plan as to where things are and will be rolled out. Okay, so just want to say thanks to Vignesh and the team, the sponsors, for having this event. Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate that. And hang around. There's a quiz out later today, so you might be lucky winner for one of those 3 prizes. And I think, with that, just want to say big thanks. I'm going to be around a few conferences later this year. There's a couple of them in the UK, Belgium, and Amsterdam. So if you happen to be there, hope to see you there. But any questions, feel free to ask me or put in the chat. But other than that, thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, Chirag. Thanks. That was a wonderful session. So, folks, if you have any
Yeah.
questions,